Schon alleine die Aussage, die Fremden kämen. Jetzt kämen die Fremden.
The mere words, the foreigners are coming, now the foreigners are coming, would be uttered with a certain reverence. And then all your things had to be packed away. And the tourists weren't allowed to see how we lived, and they weren't allowed to see what we ate, because then they might no longer feel comfortable. So somewhere along the line, we adopted a certain submissiveness so as to make the guests feel more comfortable. That's why I can remember that we ate different things from the guests, because offering our cooking to the guests would have been an impertinence.
Anderes gegessen haben, als die Gäste bekommen haben. Und unsere Küche den Gästen anbieten, das war eigentlich wäre eine Zumutung gewesen.
But back then, we thought we had to offer what they had in Germany in our holiday resort of Rhein-in-Taufers, or in our region, as in South Tyrol as a whole, so that the guests would feel at home. Now, when I think of certain dishes that we laugh at today, I always have the Hawaii schnitzel in mind, with a pineapple ring on top, which basically is totally out of place in our part of the world. But it took people here a while to realize this.
In unserer Gegend nichts zu suchen hat. Aber diese Erkenntnis musste erst mit der Zeit reifen.
Ich kann mich erinnern, dass in der Zeit...
I can remember that at the time there were also folklore evenings in Schlanders. For example, in the castle courtyard, where the Schuhplatter would do their thigh-slapping routine, and folk music was played by groups that made that sort of music. Because people thought that foreigners might like it, and that it was typical of here, although it actually wasn't. But it was all staged for the foreigners.
Ich war 1978, aber nur für ganz kurz.
In 1978, but only for a very short time, I was the fledgling director of the tourist office, as it was called back then, in Kaltern for a few months. I can remember that was when the tourism boom was already well underway, especially in Kaltern. And the major event that always took place in Kaltern at the time was the big wine festival in autumn. That was a huge event. I helped to organize it back then, with music bands and folklore events and all that goes with it. What I particularly remember about this festival, which would be unthinkable today, is that there was a large village fountain on the Kaltern village square, and for this wine festival, which ran for 2 weeks, local wine was poured into it through hoses, and the guests, they were mainly German guests in Uberech and Kaltern at the time, could then drink this wine. We called it Kaltern Leps, low-quality wine that they could drink for free.
Billigwein konnten daraus kostenlos trinken.
Ja, angefangen hat es eigentlich.
Yes, it actually began when Leo Gorschler called me to say that he was up at the Schöne Aussicht hut with 15 journalists, and he needed me with my accordion. I went out with my accordion, and he came clattering in with his helicopter. So I got in, flew to the Schöne Aussicht hut, and then we had lots of fun up there, and the journalists were all delighted. And in the 2, 3 or 4 weeks that followed, it was all in the papers, from Munich to Hamburg. Schnalstal Valley insider tip, great atmosphere. And then we realized that these journalists covered skiing in winter and wrote about Formula One and tennis in summer. So we went to the Formula One and tennis events to treat the journalists there with wine, cured ham, and traditional crispy bread from South Tyrol. We went to 3 or 4 races at Zeltwig, Hockenheim, and Monza. Then we were at the Hahnenkamm ski races, at the Laberhorn, Garmisch, and Schladminger World Cup races. We were everywhere in winter. Then, of course, in Zeltwig, we called out, "Ingemar Stenmark, please come to the Schnalstal helicopter." Ingemar Stenmark was there. We said it, and 100,000 people heard it.
But this change has slowly been coming. So, for example, when it was the Torgelen season, sampling the new wine, the innkeepers would say, "No, there's no room for you. The Germans are coming, and you lot are so fussy, and we always have to serve you the very best, while we can serve the tourists anything, and they're still happy." And then there was something else that still pains me today. That guidebook author, Manara, would regularly reveal the most secret and magical places in the papers and make money out of it. And then they all became overcrowded because everyone wanted to go to these specially beautiful places that nobody had known about. And so all the magic was gone.
Und dann gab es natürlich idiotische Skilift.
And then, of course, there were idiotic ski lift projects on the Moorstock above Ahornach, in Rhein on the Magerstein, and up to the Kofler Arm. So it was as if people wanted to outdo each other and were looking for places where they could build lifts all over the place. And fortunately, a very strong environmental group was formed. And then the local people realized that it really wasn't necessary. And the majority actually turned against it.
Hat dann auch die Bevölkerung eingesehen, also das muss jetzt nun wirklich nicht sein. Und die Bevölkerung war da schon eigentlich zum Großteil dagegen. Zu viel ist einfach.
Too much is simply no good. And back then, I realized that things were slowly starting to head in a direction that I didn't like. The precious quality and the deep feeling for the land and what was special and authentic. These were all being overrun, and this was simply not sufficiently appreciated.
Die 1970er Jahre waren ohnehin.
The 1970s were, at any rate, a time when freedom was on everyone's lips. The attitude to life was that there were no limits, with people saying anything is possible. And with the lure of this whole upswing, of course no one wanted to be left behind. Everyone tried to join in, and they above all wanted to be part of it. People wanted to benefit. They wanted to enjoy this freedom, this boundless freedom. And in this maelstrom, the great upswing in the 1970s had no limit. Sometimes also in a negative sense.
Negativen, grenzenlos geschehen.